Good morning. This is Robert Phoenix broadcasting to you live from Austin, Texas. We hit the 9/11 mark today. How about that? I try to get there every day as close to 9/11 as possible as a memorial for 9/11, not just for the people that actually died in 9/11. Yes, there were people that died in 9/11, but also the unsolved mystery of 9/11. The secret, the hidden, the occluded, the occulted history of 9/11, who was behind it and why. So we try to get there every day at 9/11 just to keep it kind of in the conversation. Although I am thinking about moving the show to 8 o'clock in the morning, which would give me more time to work with people on readings and such like that. So it's kind of in the back of my head. I'm thinking that we're going to move the show on Sunday night to 8 p.m., but it probably won't be this Sunday, only because, of course, I am a football junkie, for better or worse, and I'll be watching the Super Bowl, also known as the Superb Owl, and I will be talking a little about the Super Bowl today and the relationship between the Super Bowl and the State of the Union address, which we're going to get into today. We're going to have probably about a half an hour, maybe 35, 40-minute show, kind of rip through things and keep it up and moving and get you on your day, the expressway, to your own experience. So last night, of course, we had the State of the Union address. I was on Clyde Lewis and his show, Clyde Lewis, Ground Zero. I was on there for a couple hours last night. And I dig Clyde. I like that dude. I really like that dude. He's a Pisces. I think he's born 0 degrees Pisces, if I'm not mistaken. It's either 0 or 1. I think it's 0. Ground Zero, get it? And he's a dragon. I think he's a Pisces. I know he's a Pisces dragon. It's just the degree. I think he's born on the same day as Kurt Cobain, and one of my favorite singers and performers in rock music, Ian Brown. So Clyde is like he's like the dark version of George Norrie. Like if there was any real justice in the world, Clyde Lewis would just be smoking George Norrie. Absolutely smoking him. And even John Wells. I like John Wells a lot too. Of course, John was too committed to the truth, which is why he was banished. Out ye truth speaker. George. Anyway, I was on Clyde Lewis last night, and there for 2 hours we talked about the State of the Union. And I'm going to get into some of the topics that we talked about in case you missed that broadcast. And I'll bring in a couple of others, which were not covered. Didn't have enough time on the show. But I want to just talk about the optics of the State of the Union. And then I'm going to get into kind of the esoteric of the State of the Union, bring the Super Bowl into it, and try to wrap this thing up and give you some interesting things to think about. The optics of the State of the Union are terrible for the Democrats. And again, I'm not throwing down with the Republicans. The Republicans have an evil stench on them, as they just blindly supported the Bush administration through 8 years of completely gutting the United States and its freedoms. All the stuff that we're dealing with, all of it, everything that Trump is dealing with, and the memo, which is going to be released on the heels of the Eclipse, all this stuff has its roots in the Bush administration and those 8 years following the aforementioned 9/11. The Patriot Act, and just its open season on Americans and spying and surveilling on Americans. Open season on conflict around the world. Preemptive strikes. It was as if, the 9/11 gave us carte blanche to do anything that we wanted anywhere in the world. It brought us the metastasizing of Guantanamo Bay, which, by the way, Trump wants to not only continue, but actually increase and build on. look, I did not like Obama for a number of reasons, but there were two things about Obama that I actually like sided with him on. One was shutting down Guantanamo. I think it needs to be shut down. It needs to be shut down. The other is that he didn't always get along with Bibi Netanyahu. It was always fun watching the two of them in the same room. It's like there wasn't enough atmosphere. There wasn't enough space in those four walls for those two enormous egos. And he didn't give in so easily on the issues that Netanyahu so desperately wanted the United States to be a part of. So I give Obama, see, I am so fair and balanced, as long as it meets my criterion. No, I'm so fair and balanced that I'm giving Obama some props. And this is not a president I really liked. Although he was cool, right? Obama was cool. He was a cool guy, played basketball. You know he got high in the White House. You know that was going on. There is no doubt about that. Hush, hush, secrets. But by and large, an incredibly divisive president and used race as a weapon. He weaponized race, and the country's not been the same since Obama. Yes, we can talk about it. We can talk about it till we turn blue in the face, and it will not necessarily change the position on race. What changes the position on race is opening up your heart and just dialing in from that place, person to person, face to face. And it has very little to do, because language is a very tricky thing. It's a spell, right? So even when we're talking about something, even me, when I talk about things, we're engaged in a form of spell casting. So I'll never forget. One time I was not that I had to have my head turned or my consciousness switched on because I was one person and I had this event and all of a sudden I became another person. But I want to share something that to this day I still remember. And that was when I was on a freeway in Oakland. And I ran out of gas on the freeway, which you should never do, by the way. Never. And I ran out of gas, and all of a sudden, this car pulls over. And it's an older station wagon, and it was a black couple, and the woman was older, the guy was younger, it was probably her son. And they wasted no time in pulling over and picking me up and taking me to a gas station where I was able to use a can, and they brought me all the way back, and I put gas in my tank and went to the gas station and turned the can, and it was like they wasted absolutely no time in just saying this guy needs some help. And I mean, ultimately, that's how we all should be. And not that I wasn't like a person before that event and another person after that event. If I've seen people pulled over on the side of the road or needed a ride, generally speaking, I've helped them out. One time was a really funny story. I think I might have told this story before, but if I have, stop me or forgive me. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Anyway, so I was living in Seattle, and I was going to work one day. It was a morning. I was working as a waiter in Seattle. This is back in 1989, but probably 89. So there's this long sort of tunnel that you have to go through from I think it's like the sort of eastern, sort of northeastern side of Seattle, like Bothell, or not Bothell, just the northeastern side of Seattle. I live in Green Lake. For you people that are familiar, you know where that is. So I get in my car and I see this woman on the side of the road, and I'm like, oh man, she needs a ride. So I pick her up, and thinking that she needs a ride, and she asks me what I want. I'm like, what's going on here? And she was a hooker, and I picked up a hooker, and I was like, well, I don't really want anything. I just thought I'd give you a ride, and she was pissed off at me. I was like bad for business. She was losing money on that little ride. So I had to go and I think I actually turned around and took her back. I felt that bad. And could you imagine the The awkwardness. Okay. Anyway, it wasn't like I was a person before I had that gas can situation. And I think that's how we need to operate. That's how we need. I mean, we have these spiritual principles that are inside of ourselves. You treat another person like you treat yourself, and hopefully that's with the highest and best intention and with the loving grace of God Almighty and the Creator of the universe. And that's how if we came from that place, the majority of the time, boy, we'd be in a much better place than we are and have been. And the biggest deterrent to that, of course, is fear, suspicion, doubt, and ignorance on all sorts of different sides. Anyway, enough preaching for now. So the optics of this experience with Trump last night are startling. And I am not a Republican. I'm not a Republican apologist, or I'm not a Republican advocate, but the optics are terrible. Absolutely terrible. When Trump would have of course, one of the many standing ovations that are just hardwired into a speech like that, what are the Democrats doing? They're sitting there scowling. And they managed to drum up a tepid response for the infrastructure comment or piece of the speech. And I was like, man, this is just a bad look. It's a bad. I don't remember. I'm not a big State of the Union guy. I mean, when Bush would give them, I would cringe. When Obama would give them, I would patently avoid them, although I think I caught a few minutes of one. And I watched this one because, number one, I was going to be on Clyde's show last night, and also because of its historical precedence of being on Eclipse, which, again, we're going to talk about. But if you're a Democrat, and it's like, you know what it's like? It's like you're going out to dinner, okay? And you're going to a restaurant that most of the family agrees upon, and then you have the one kid who's an adolescent who is scowling the entire time because the restaurant isn't what they want to experience for whatever reason. Oh, that restaurant is terrible. They don't have any vegan options. That's what it looks like. It looks like that kid in the family. And the rest of the family's like, hey, this is great. We get to go out and we get to be together and have this experience. And then you have the petulant scowler. And who wants to be around that? Who wants to? Everybody's had a kind of a version of that. Not everybody. Some people are really smart and they have really high emotional IQ, so they choose people accordingly. God bless them. But people have had the scowlers, the petulant, the moody ones. And do you want to really be around that all the time? No. I mean, it's, if a person is going through something, that's one thing. You talk to them and you try to open up and have them open up and then have some kind of a bridge and an experience and they can unleash some steam or whatever that they've got backed up. And then you could have kind of a more congenial flow and conversation and communication and just being, all around being present, being open. These people they're not present, they're not open. And I get the beef. They lost. It is an ideological turf war and they're not giving in. They're not going to give 1 inch at all. And it's a bad optic. It's a really, really bad optic. If I were the head of the Democratic Party, I would say, tonight you're going to get up and you're going to applaud. You're going to stand up. You're going to stand up and you're going to applaud for everything just like everybody else. And that doesn't mean that your position is weakened, or that doesn't mean that you're sacrificing your position or your talking points. In fact, you can build on that. Wouldn't that be startling? Wouldn't that be absolutely startling? That would have been the headline. If they wanted to steal the State of the Union from Trump, they should have gotten up. And I'm not saying that out of respect or anything. I mean, it could just be a really strategic move. That would have been news. That would have been news. And then they could have come out and said, look, Nancy Pelosi, who's about 6 months away from having a complete Parkinson's meltdown. If the Democratic Party is smart, they have got to move her out. I mean, that is a really, really bad optic. I'm sorry. It just is. I mean, from a symbolic level, you have this person who can barely utter a sentence or have a coherent thought. And this is one of your spokespeople? I mean, I understand it. She's a woman, and now she's a woman with a disability. I mean, that's a big deal. Do we discriminate against disabilities? No, I mean, we don't. But again, from an optics level, I think it's important. She's got to be able to, pull her weight. If not, she's got to. Just my 2 cents. Okay, it's just, again, it's a bad optic and doesn't. So if I'm the Democratic Party, I'm sitting down. I'm saying, look, we're standing tonight. We're plotting, and when we talk about this, in the aftermath of this speech. What's our talking point? The talking point is no, we're not giving in and we're not caving. But we believe in making America great again. And we want to build on this because there are certain things that President Trump left out. And we want to be the voice of those things. So if we want to make America great again, we've got to be taken seriously and we have to have a seat at the table. And then they just redefine their talking points. But instead, what do? They just sit there petulantly and create more division, more duality. It's just not good. It's not good. I mean, that's the look of a loser. I'm sorry. It's the look of a loser. And I'm not trying to be all about Trump and winning. And that's not it. But if you ever see a team that's lost, that's what it looks like. And I've been a part of coaching. And I've had teams lose. And I've had to talk to 12-year-old boys who had the same look on their faces. It's a bad optic. And by the way, Cory Booker, you got to figure out what side you're on. Because Cory Booker's sitting there with the Democrats playing the same game, and yet they're trying to build him up as a libertarian candidate, along with Rand Paul, to create kind of a third party. That's been talked about, by the way. Pick your side, Cory Booker. This is not a time for fence. Look, not a time for fence sitters. It's just not. Was it a great speech? I'm not certain. He covered all the talking points. It was a softer, more conciliatory speech. He was getting into the Cancerian part of his chart. And of course, we had the moon in Leo last night. Just came out of Cancer. So this pre-eclipse moon was sweeping through all of Trump's planets in the sign of Cancer. And that's when they were putting the finishing touches on his speech. So even though the speech was given under the eclipsed moon, it was probably edited, topped off, and polished as the moon was waxing through those planets in Trump's chart. That's that speech, timing-wise, was incredibly powerful. We got a comment in the chat room. Let's see what that's about. The Scalars versus the Peacocks. I like that. Steve Crimmy chiming in there. The Scalars. Am I right? Am I totally missing? Am I totally missing the target on this? And it's tiring. It is tiring. It's going. They should take a page out of Alinsky. Once Alinsky said, if once a movement or once an action, if you stay too long on one action, if you stay too long on one movement, you lose the energy. And so it's like, move the target, keep moving the target, freeze and polarize. I mean, that was the Alinsky model. They've been on this thing for 2 years now. 2 years. And it is getting just absolutely tiring. And they are signing their own death warrant. I'm sorry. This is, and I think we need two parties. I think we need these entities that have a check and balance system. But clearly, both of them have lost sight of what they were originally created for. The Democrats lost the ability to stand up for the common guy and the common gal. And then they turned into identity politics, and then they cast their gaze far afield into third world countries and decided that this was going to be their new demographic. This was their new demographic. They didn't care about the downtrodden coal miners in West Virginia, or the auto workers that lost their jobs in Detroit, or the steel mill people in Pennsylvania. They gave two shits about those people. What they saw was an absolutely burgeoning opportunity to bring people in this country from other places, because they could use the same kind of standards or the same kind of metric. Say, these are the new downtrodden. These are the new downtrodden. And so what we're going to do is we're going to support them and get behind them, because at some point in time, they're going to support and get behind us. And we're just going to leave everything else here in this country behind. The unions betrayed the workers in this country. And the Democrats used to be very, very strong union people. They still are when the union is part of their community organizing. But they've lost the plot. And what they need to do is come back to that. But in order to come back to that, they have to admit defeat. And this would be two levels of defeat. They lost the election, and then they have to admit defeat, that their platform and their ideology is ultimately a losing ideology. Boy, is that hard. Who likes to say I've lost? Who likes to say that? But it's part of life. It's part of life. Now, the Republicans, they should thank their lucky stars for Donald Trump. That's all I'm saying. All these rhinos who don't like Trump, who are part of the swamp. And again, I'm not sitting here being a cheerleader for Trump, but he is saving their party. And even when he distances theoretically himself from Steve Bannon, who, by the way, has just went into a black hole. There's no coverage on Steve Bannon right now. Now they're kind of I mean, did you see Paul Ryan last night? Trump was talking about God. When was a president? I mean, George Bush used to do it, but those were platitudes with George Bush. Just platitudes. You know the story, right? I've told this before. There's a great, if you can find it, there's a great news piece that Tom Brokaw did back in the 2000s. And what he did is he went to all these mega churches, because it was the mega churches and it was the Christian conservatives who really supported Bush. They saw him as being a champion of both Christ and politics. So he did a big piece on the Christian conservative community. And there were two things that really stood out to me in that documentary. One was Ted Haggard was a central figure in that documentary. Ted Haggard was the pastor of one of Colorado's biggest megachurches, and one of the biggest megachurches in the country. And he talked about how him and about 6 or 7 other pastors from all around the country would have conference calls with the Bush administration, people inside in the Bush White House, and they would have talking points. They would actually go over talking points, pieces of the Bible, parts of the Bible. So what they were doing is they were syncing up. And when Trump would have an address or a speech, and he had a lot of Rose Garden moments. He met with the press quite a bit. Helen Thomas became kind of a superstar under Bush. Anyway, so Bush would use pieces and snippets and parts of text from the Bible. And these pastors in these mega churches would basically say, hey, listen to our president. He's using our language. He's speaking directly to us. We have a close relationship with whatever they. So it was this really concerted effort to tie into that community. He wasn't a Christian at all. He was just trying to find talking points. And how many images did we see with Bush with the aureole around his head, the angelic round aureole around his head, many, many, many times. And then the other part of that documentary, which was really fascinating, was a woman who went to, I think it might have been Haggard's megachurch in Colorado, and she talked about how once she found out that he was a Christian president, She didn't have to worry about politics anymore. She didn't have to worry about the state of the country because she knew that there was a man of faith in the White House. She trusted him and she could get on with her life. She could think about her kids. She could think about her husband, very busy woman, working a job, being a mother. That was just one less thing she had to worry about. And I thought that was really, really fascinating. And unfortunately, she probably should have been paying closer attention. Anyway, it was a very interesting speech, just from not necessarily from the content perspective. Oh, getting back to Paul Ryan and the Christian thing. So Trump is talking about God. And he putting the emphasis. That's a hard G and a hard D at the end. And it was almost defiant. He punched that. By the end of the speech, by the way, his throat chakra was completely shut down. He had nothing left. Absolutely nothing. But when he talked about that moment, there's Paul Ryan pointing up towards heaven. Since when did this guy do stuff like that? Right? So I get back to the fact that the Republican Party should actually be on their knees for Donald Trump. And maybe they will be at some point in time. Again, I am not necessarily saying, oh, this is the greatest thing. There are parts of that speech I was not crazy about. He talked about Venezuela. He talked about Cuba. It's the hit list. Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, Syria. And we all know who wants those flipped. And so he's checking those boxes. Not a fan. But he saved the Republican Party. It's going to be very interesting now to see what happens with this memo. I mean, this memo could be the dim mock. You know what the dim mock is? The dim mock is it's a punch that they use in martial arts. It's a punch to the heart. It stops the heart. This could be the dim mock to the Democratic Party. We'll see how that goes. As far as the symbolism, wow. Okay, here we go. How many presidents have had a State of the Union on an eclipse, on a blood moon, a red moon, a blue moon to a red moon, on an eclipse? I think we could go through just about every single State of the Union speech, and it's never happened. Never. Never. This is a president who was born on a lunar eclipse. He was born for a moment like this. And guess what? At 9 p.m. last night, when he uttered his first words from Washington, D.C., his sun in Gemini was right on the midheaven. Right on the midheaven. He had the greatest access to the entire world with his sun on the midheaven. They could not have planned a better time for him to actually have a speech. Now, what's also really interesting, we talked about this on Clyde's show last night, is that when the speech went off, the moon was at around 4 degrees Leo. And, of course, we know Trump has Pluto in Leo in the 12th house. So this moon was getting ready to conjunct his Pluto. Man, that's a big, big, big conjunction. I mean, I think ultimately Trump is paving the way for his daughter to become president of the United States. And Clyde and I talked a little bit about this last night. Now, Ivanka is a Scorpio. We know that Pluto rules Scorpio. Even though in Trump's chart he's a boomer, Pluto and Leo. And the moon is feminine. It is a feminine aspect, and Leo represents children. Okay, so does Trump have a feminine child who is ruled by Pluto? Yeah, it's Ivanka. And I think some of this, and I don't have to count, I'd like to know how many times they cut to Ivanka. I think some of this is laying the groundwork for Ivanka to eventually become president of the United States. That's if Trump survives this Saturn opposition to these Cancerian planets in his 11th house. And the more that I'm seeing him in terms of how all this has been staged from literally an esoteric perspective, I would say that his chances of getting through that Saturn opposition are increasing. They're increasing. So I'm going to have to revisit some of my predictions. But I do think that between now and the midterms, it could get very interesting, especially for his oldest son. Donald Trump Jr., who happens to be a Capricorn, with his own sun in Donald Trump's 5th house. So while we have this blood moon going in, the blue moon going into a blood moon going into the lunar eclipse, what's happening in the 6th house? The 6th house is the house of open enemies. And there's the sun and Mercury in Aquarius. So what do we think about when we think about Aquarius? We think about radicals, revolutionaries. We think about change. It's very interesting. So there is a level of exposition now. And if we could assign one sign to the progressive, socialist, communist, collectivist movement in demographic, it's Aquarius. It's Aquarius. And what does Leo represent? It represents the monarchy. It represents kings and queens and all that stuff, right? So here we go. In the 12th house, it could be a sense of gathering power with Moon on Pluto, right? And perhaps even from an esoteric level, empowering his own daughter behind the scenes in an esoteric way. Meanwhile, in the 6th house, exposing the quote-unquote radical element that he has to go up against. And that exposition was not great. It was not great with the Democrats last night. Another interesting aspect of the eclipse is that the United States has its true node in Leo. So the eclipse was hitting the true node of the United States. And Clyde and I talked about this last night. I'm going to go on record. Again, I'm not saying it was a great speech. There were talking points in there that were crafted to really speak directly to the people that elected Trump. And there are other talking points in there that were basically putting people on notice that this is our plan, this is what we're going to do. Some people said, watch out, war with Korea, North Korea is imminent, based on what Trump didn't say versus what he did say. That remains to be seen. But Clyde and I both agreed that this could be a real turning point for the United States. This speech, and not necessarily the speech itself, but the esoteric perspective of the speech. That the current, the esoteric current that is underlying or moving through the speech at a deeper level could actually be that turning point. So the rumor has it that when the Declaration of Independence was being signed, that Ben Franklin actually wanted to wait a few days because the moon was in Capricorn when they were gathering together and certifying this document. And he wanted to wait until the moon was in Aquarius because that moon in Aquarius fit into this model of the New Atlantis and Utopia and Francis Bacon, going all the way back to Plato and pre-Plato, right? So this was a kind of an esoteric moment that Franklin chose. And so we know for a fact that timing is important in terms of how these people who are connected to esoteric principles, the occult and the hidden knowledge, many of them were either Masons or Rosicrucians, and it runs all the way through. For better or worse, it runs all the way through the insurgency, the actual revolution, and the documents that they signed. So it's a part of our history. So when we have a president who gives a speech on an eclipse, and all these things are lining up, it's not a coincidence. These things are absolutely, in my opinion, chosen for their particular point in time. What's also interesting is that this moon is right on. I look at Israel's chart, and Israel's moon is in Leo. They also have Saturn in Leo, all in the 10th house. So, and I believe the true node also in Leo. So if that's the case, then I think I have to look at the chart. So if that's the case, because, well, let's see, it's a sun. They're a Taurus sun. So it's not going to be an eclipse. But Anyway, so this moon is right on Israel's moon, Israel's true node, and their Saturn in the 10th house. And when you look at these eclipses and these moons, they actually play a pretty specific role in the formation of the nation state of Israel. And after they have the blood moon, something happens in terms of their history. They declare independence after a blood moon. They recapture Jerusalem after a blood moon. You go back into the Inquisition. There's actually a blood moon moment around the Inquisition. So if that's the case, and the moon was on Israel's moon and their true node in Saturn, then they're part of this discussion. They're part of this discussion about what happens next. And what that thing is, well, we're going to find out. By the way, I looked at Israel's Saturn in Leo, conjunct Trump's ascendant, conjunct Trump's Mars. He cannot get out of this relationship that he has with Israel. It is dominant. So we've got Saturn on his ascendant. We've got Mike Pence's Pluto on his ascendant. Do the math on that. Very interesting. So one of the other things that I talked about last night with Clyde is this whole combination of the eagle and the lion. Because Aquarius is the eagle and Leo is the lion. So when we have the opposition, we have this dialogue that is, it's the one time alchemically where we talk about the eagle and the lion and what happens when you put them together. You get the griffin. You get the griffin, which is the most royal of beasts according to mythology and alchemy, because the eagle rules the air and the lion rules the land. The king of the air and the king of the land, and they come together when we have this lunar solar opposition. And it happens twice a year. It happens in Leo and it happens in Aquarius. This just so happens to be Aquarius and Leo. It's a very interesting combination. And there's also a symbolic reference of the griffin as it relates to Christ. It's a symbol. It's an actual symbol for Christ, interestingly enough. So here we have this fusion, this alchemical fusion of the ruler of the air and the ruler of the land. And guess who we have in the Super Bowl this weekend? We have Nick Foles, who's an Aquarius. We have Tom Brady, who's a Leo. So again, we have this confluence. It's really interesting symbolic confluence that's taking place. And by the way, this full moon, this eclipse was right on Tom Brady's sun. At 7:25 this morning in Boston, Massachusetts, Minnesota, because that's where he is now. It would have been, 6:25 Minnesota. It's a different time zone. That moon was eclipsing Tom Brady's sun. It's going to be a very interesting Super Bowl for Brady. And I made a wild prediction last night that the Eagles are going to win and Nick Foles is going to be the MVP. That was just my wild prediction. You know, I'm willing to look at it on Monday and say, boy, was I wrong. Maybe I'll go be a CPA. But it just looks that way. And then there was this weird event with Brady that happened on Monday. He was on a show on WEEI. It's a radio station that he has a normal slot on. And he's got this documentary that's I think it's being done by Deepak Chopra's son, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody can look that up if they want to do a little fact checking. But I think Deepak Chopra is doing this, his son is doing this documentary, A Tom versus Time. And it's about Brady and how he wants to extend his career and play until he's 50 and everything that goes along with that. It's not just the body and keeping the body young and supple and elastic. He's really into elasticity versus strength. But it's also the mental piece that goes along with it, because society says, well, you can't play till you're 50. You can only do things up to a certain point in time. So Brady is into the mind game. And so he's really doing his best to kind of reorganize his mind, reorganize his consciousness, and not be defined by cultural or physical standards. It's a really interesting process that he's going through. Anyway, this documentary pops up on Facebook. You can watch it if you want. It's on Facebook. Tom versus Time. And he's got a young daughter. He's about 5 years old. And she's preening. And she's really, sort of doing her little camera moment. And this guy from WEEI, Reimer, Alex Reimer, calls her a pissant. And Brady is not happy. And as a parent, I wouldn't be happy either. What gives this guy the right to call his daughter a pissant? But this is happening on the run-up to this moon, this moon that eclipses his sun. And again, we're talking about the feminine with the moon, and he's affected by this around his daughter. Last week, it came out that Gisele Bündchen wanted him to retire because of concussions. And so there's some interesting things that are popping up around this moon for Brady. It'll be a very interesting Super Bowl. So we have the griffin coming up as a symbol. Now, as the world would have it, in the realm of synchro-mysticism, just 2 nights ago, there was a trade in the NBA that was notable. Why was it notable? Because the LA Clippers traded their star player, whose name is Blake Griffin. So here we go. This is just what, one day before the State of the Union address, this Griffin imagery comes up. It's the combination of the lion and the eagle. Very, very interesting stuff alchemically. Ruling the air and ruling the ground. The Lord of the air and the Lord of the ground in terms of the beasts. Right? Well, it's a new day in America. It's a new day in America. The old day is over. Gone are the feelings of negativity, shame, guilt. We live in a new time where we proclaim the positive, the happy, the good. And in so doing, we make America great again. A little they live there for you. All right, that's going to wrap it up for today. Hey, ride the wave. This is what I was talking about. Again, this is what I was talking about when Trump was going through the gauntlet. And it was a gauntlet. When he was going through the gauntlet, people were saying, I hate Trump, I hate Trump, I hate Trump. It's all fake, it's all bullshit. He's going to be put in, blah, 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 blah. There were other people saying it's all in the fix. It's either going to be Hillary or Trump. They're going to both represent the same interests. In some degree, that's true. But I looked at it as like, well, look, there's some momentum here. There's some interesting momentum. We're breaking the chain of custody from Bush to Clinton, from Clinton to Bush to Clinton inside Obama. There was something about Trump that broke that cycle. We were either going to get Bush or probably Clinton again. Very good chance that Neil Bush, had Trump not shot his tire out on the way to the presidency, we'd probably have either a Bush or a Clinton again for president. I don't think Ted Cruz would have won against Bush ultimately in the long run, because the Bush machine just has too much money, too much power, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I said, hey, look, there's some momentum here. Just get on the momentum. Let's break down the mind lock of political correctness and speech and everything that's associated with it. Let's break the mind lock. And let's break the mind lock with empathy. You don't have to be an asshole about it. You don't have to be an asshole. That's the worst, absolute worst thing. No. Quietly, respectfully, with dignity, break the mind lock of political correctness and groupthink and group speech. That is the spell. Those are the chains that we needed to break. And we're on our way towards that. It's an interesting challenge. It's an interesting, I wouldn't call it a battle. I would say it's an interesting dialectic to be a part of right now. But you're a part of it, so ride the momentum and ride some of this momentum, but apply it to your own life. Just apply it to your life. Find those things inside of your life that are meaningful. They're meaningful. And give them some love. Give them some attention. Give them the respect that they deserve, including the people in your life that make your life important. Because you can't live your life alone. And as much as I tried to do it in this lifetime, being an only child and kind of on the fringe of things, so I can, basically shout from my perch at the edge of the world, I've realized that we just cannot do this alone. Absolutely. And I'm lucky because I'm reminded of it every day. And I'm reminded of it through the people that love me or are close to me, deep personal relationships, and also you people out there. And it's really important for me to recognize that. So thank you for your presence in my life and what you do and bring to it. And there's a lot of value. I get all kinds of really good stuff. People send me links about stories and things that I'm not aware of and I don't know about, and just the general camaraderie and the joie de vivre that is shared on a communal basis from me to you and back again. And we're part of a big community because I know you listen to other people too. I'm a spoke. There's a lot of spokes around this hub, and we are connected in an invisible network, in an invisible community of body, mind, and spirit. So thank you for hanging out here and listening today. You've been listening to 15 Minutes of Flame. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'll be back tomorrow, 24 hours from today. And you know the saying, use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open what's possible. Have a great day.